that you can have an Israeli government of such extremity is that Israelis have been given the message, and this plays into how this happened. How come this huge failure? Israelis have been given the message by their friends in America, Britain, and the West that it's okay, you can do anything to the Palestinians, and we'll have your back. And that leads to Israel making the wrong decisions. It means Israel has avoided the hard choices. It means Israel has told itself that it can deal with this. The Palestinians are not a real problem. The world is okay with it. And that leads to the kind of hubris, the kind of ignoring of the reality, which I think has led to a deep decomposition within the system. And today and yesterday, Israelis are waking up to a psychological confusion and shock, the likes of which is unprecedented.
The Israeli government have brazenly, publicly, and openly declared their intention to commit a war crime and have commenced that war crime against the people of Gaza, saying that they intend to starve of food, electricity, water, 2.2 million people. That is a war crime under the Fourth Geneva Convention. And you try to suggest there is some symmetry, some equivalence between the actions of Hamas and what Israel has been doing to the Palestinians for decades. Will you admit that the terrible loss of life and escalation of violence that we have seen in the last few days is simply a continuation of the crimes against humanity, the war crimes of the state of Israel?
Do you condemn Hamas?
I think I've made my point.
Well, no, you haven't quite made the point. Lots of people.
Wait a minute. You love interrupting people when they're trying to answer a question, don't you? Now, to say it for the third time then, yesterday I sent out a statement which made it very clear I wanted peace, I wanted a ceasefire, and I wanted a process which ended the Israeli occupation of Palestine, which is fundamental to it. I don't support any attacks, therefore I criticise them all, and that, I think, is the end of the matter. Thank you.
So, yes or no, you condemn these attacks, Mr. Corbyn? Mr. Corbyn, it's a yes or no question.
All war criminals. We know what you do.
Palestinians suffer every day the brutality of apartheid.
We
There are thousands, there are millions. We are all Palestinians.
We know
who you are. We know what you do. Merchants of death, we're coming for you. We know who you are. We know what you do. Merchants of death, we're coming for you. We know who you are. We know what you do. Merchants of death, we're coming for you. Free, free Palestine. Free, free Palestine. Free, free Palestine. Free, free Palestine.
Regret that the international community has not heeded our warnings for all these years. Regret that this was allowed to fester for decades. Regret that there is attention now only because blood has been spilled. I wish we did not get to this moment.
So you listed a number of things you regret there. Do you regret the loss of innocent life in Israel?
Every loss of life is regrettable, of course, and tragic. The question is, how do we stop this? How do we provide an alternative path? How do we learn the lessons and the mistakes of the past? How do we treat the Palestinian people after 100 years of suffering? How do we stop this demise into the mayhem that you have described? Do not underestimate people's will and desire for freedom, to end occupation and captivity. This isn't about Hamas only. This isn't about the last 48 hours. This has been ongoing for more than 100 years. It started here, by the way, Louise, in this very city. It was Britain that gave our rights away without even consulting us. This is about time that we really give a different path.
But I must make it absolutely truth. The reason why I chased them from Uganda was because of the economy of Uganda. Uganda was going to be bankrupt. That is the reason why I chased away the Israelis.
You said you were friends with Golda Meir.
Yes, because she used to give me very good entertainment when I go to Israel.
Then you changed completely from an Israeli alliance to the Arab alliance.
I changed from Israeli alliance because Israeli are criminals and that they are not trusted people. They don't tell the world the truth. They were taken to Palestine as refugees, and then they changed Palestine to become a state of Israel by force of arms given to them by Americans. and the British.
Your brother kills my son. So what do? I come and I kill your father and your cousin. And then you think, well, I killed your father and your cousin. I'm going to come back and I'm going to kill 4 of your people. And then I come back and say, yeah, no problem. It's 16 of you this time. And then you come back and you say, 16, eh? Let's try for 32. And so this is what happens. This is actually why justice systems are set up, by the way. There's a bunch of reasons justice systems are set up. And one is to punish the guilty. That's one. The other is to have the guilty repent. That's 2. To maintain social order. That's 3. Here's another one that no one ever thinks about. It's to alleviate you from the responsibility of revenge. That's what it's for. Because otherwise, what happens? You kill 1, I kill 2. You kill 4, I kill 8. You kill 16. And soon, everyone's
This is not your house.
Yes, but if I go, you don't go back. So what's the problem? Why are you yelling at me? I didn't do this. I didn't do this.
But
It's easy to yell at me, but I didn't do this.
you are stealing my house.
And if I don't steal it, someone else is going to steal it.
No one is allowed to steal it, يا عمي.
Because the beginning of this is Europe was so anti-Semitic that they allowed Nazi Germany to rise, that they allowed the Holocaust to happen. This is what Europe did. That then they were like, oh, you know, we're awful. We allowed this to happen to our fellow white man. You know what? Woof, but we're still anti-Semitic. They still were. And so instead of accepting people back into their homes, because these are Ashkenazi Jewish people who were from Germany, we're from Italy, we're from Russia, we're from the UK, we're from France. Instead of saying like, hey, I'm so sorry, neighbor, that, you know, I took your candy shop. This is what other European people did. They're like, you know what? You were gone because that man stole you and did atrocities to you. So I took your candy shop. I'm so sorry. Instead of giving the candy shop back to their Jewish neighbor, European powers decided, you know what? That land over there with those few people who we don't see as people because of rampant amounts of Islamophobia, also looking at anyone with brown skin as not a person, you can go over there. That is the root of it. And also, as a Black person, I can extremely empathize with the idea of, damn, these people don't want me here. I really would like to go back to this home that I read about, that I've heard about, where I'm supposed to belong. And, you know, I know Moses was a jackass and he hit the rock when he shouldn't hit the rock, but I'm sorry. And I would like to live in the land of milk and honey too. I can definitely empathize with that. But at the cost of who? At the cost of who? And that's the question people don't want to ask. When you ask people about Zionism, if you ask people 10 years ago about Zionism, it was, well, it's just a longing to be in a homeland. There's nothing negative about that. Political Zionism is the outright, no, I want an ethno-state of just us. I don't want to be around anybody else. And furthermore, that I don't want to be around anybody else, I'm going to remove these people who are indigenous to this place, and sorry to them. And actually not sorry to them. I don't feel bad for them. I wanted to use them for menial labor anyway. That is the difference between political Zionism and cultural Zionism, which the more we learned about that in the program I did, the more it reminded me of, you know, Jamaica's favorite capitalist, Marcus Garvey, and Back to Africa. The Back to Africa movement was a movement post-slavery led by Marcus Garvey and the Black Star Line that was like, hey, screw these white people in this place that we don't belong in. Let's go back to West Africa. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. There are plenty of Black people now. They're like, I'm going back. I'm going back over there because why should I go be aggressed by Brad, Chad, and Thad every day? I want to be with my own, by my own, and I don't want to deal with microaggressions every day of my life. That's well and dandy until you get to an idea of, I'm going to go over there and actually I'm going to colonize these people because now I have learned how to colonize from these white people. And you know what? Maybe I feel like I'm a better Black than those Blacks. And that's the issue. Nobody would ever allow descendants of chattel slavery in the US, in the Caribbean, in Brazil to ever say, you know what, we did a great wrong to you. Here's Nigeria.
In the fields and farms on the border wire, Israel's combat soldiers are creating jumping off points to invade Gaza. Late this afternoon at Kibbutz Be'eri, regular units and some of more than 300,000 mobilized reservists were preparing for the order to move in that most Israelis believe will. Israel's allies are gathering. Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, is flying in overnight from Washington. American support includes weapons and moving an aircraft carrier battle group closer to deter Iran's allies in Lebanon from joining the war.
The United States has Israel's back. We have the back of the Israeli people. We have their back today. We'll have it tomorrow. We will have it every day.
James Cleverly, Britain's Foreign Secretary, was already here in Israel at a frontline town near Gaza.
I'm not going to speculate on what support we might want to give. I'm here to find out.
ruling it out, though.
I'm here to find out what practical support we can give to Israel.
The Foreign Secretary was hustled into a shelter when the sirens went. Israel has the four-square support of its allies after the massacres perpetrated by Hamas. In their safe rooms, millions of Israelis are praying, waiting, often frightened now that assumptions they had about their safety have crumbled. Their government says what it's doing in Gaza is defending them. But only a few miles from this family in Ashkelon, Israel's onslaught raises questions about whether it's breaking the laws of war. In Gaza, Israel has caused immense damage in only 5 days. International humanitarian law obliges belligerents to protect civilian lives. Israel says all this is legitimate self-defense against Hamas. But it's also cut off supplies of water, food, fuel, and power to more than 2 million people and killed hundreds of civilians. Outside the main hospital in Gaza City, Ala Al-Kafane sits with the bodies of his entire close family. They'd moved twice to escape the airstrikes until one hit their borrowed apartment at 4 this morning.
I've lost my father, my brother, my uncle, 2 cousins, 2 other family members, and my pregnant wife. I'm the only survivor.
He said, "We've done nothing." Israel insists Hamas is to blame for the suffering of Palestinians. But accusations that Israel is answering the war crimes of Hamas with ones of its own have started. And at a hospital near Tel Aviv, signs of the tension in Israel. A visiting government minister gets a furious reception. A nurse yells they've been helped by every kind of civilian, but the government has given them nothing. The military build-up might steady Israeli nerves, and the defense minister said tonight, "We will wipe Hamas off the face of the earth."
Show the level of destruction. This is the Rimal area before the strikes, and this a satellite image of the same neighborhood, which came through yesterday and has been located by our colleagues at BBC Verify. More than 1,000 people are now known to have died, and 250,000.
Yeah, I can see I have been witnessing the heaviest airstrike in my 20 years covering of this story. It was by far the heaviest. I've been witnessing what the destruction in this Rimal neighborhood. For a very long time, this neighborhood has been the safe haven for most of the Gaza, and most of the streets in this neighborhood was destroyed. I was among the families who were suffering during the days. But the humanitarian side of the story is moving in a very significant way. When 2 million people lost the electricity today, we are talking about the essential services such as medical services, water supplies, food supplies are being suspended because of that. The humanitarian corridor for letting food and medicine and fuel into Gaza is a must, is a call from every Palestinian. That's why we understand tonight from a senior Egyptian official that Egypt is working closely with other countries and contacting Hamas and Israel to try to find a draft of 6 hours to allow goods and fuel to come from Egypt into Gaza.
Israel. How are people feeling about the possibility that there could be a ground invasion?
This is the most worry for the people. People in Gaza fear this because they have lived through a ground invasion before. Back in 2014, we have seen Israeli tanks in refugee camp. We are talking about a camp in the north, like 100,000 people live in a very small, tiny piece of land. If people are already exhausted by 3,000 airstrikes and 1,100 people died, are engaging in street to street and house to house fighting with Hamas in Gaza, with 2 million people living in this tiny piece of land.
Position of sieges that endanger the lives of civilians by depriving them of goods essential for their survival is prohibited under international humanitarian law, unquote.
About whole blocks, destroyed all government buildings, 20 UN facilities, including schools and clinics, all the roads, all the infrastructures, all the roads leading to the major hospitals, especially the one in the heart of Gaza City, were destroyed. So Israel bombs Palestinian families as they sleep, as they stay in the safety, so to speak, of their home, and then bombs the ways that lead help and aid and ambulances to these areas, and then bombs the ambulances that try to help those people. That's why we have about 800 Palestinian casualties. We speak about more than 400 children, women, and elderly people. Most of them were killed in the safety of their homes without any prior warning. Not that any warning would justify this Israeli brutality. Israeli war criminals are speaking about Second World War level of destruction against the Gaza Strip. What is happening in Gaza is complete and utter extermination of the non-Jewish population in occupied Palestine. As you mentioned, Israel ordered a medieval hermetic siege from air and sea. Israel has also just bombed the only way out through Egypt, the Rafah crossing. The only way out is for what's happening. What we are foreseeing is slow starvation, slow genocide. Maybe Israel is going to push us all into the sea. And I think what is making it even more difficult than before is that the whole world, not even lip service, all American and European countries and politicians are rushing to pledge allegiance to Israel and to Netanyahu. Israeli American politicians, American presidential hopefuls are literally calling for genocide. American mainstream media is not pushing back against Israeli officials, calling for the collateral damage of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians in Gaza. Why is this happening? Because we refuse to live under occupation. We refuse to live in total submission. We want freedom. We want this occupation to end. This is not a state of war, as one of your guests just mentioned. This is a state of occupation that started over 75 years. That started with the British Empire giving Palestine to the Zionist movement in 1917. Closed, so people cannot leave. And also, when we talk about people leaving, very few people in Gaza have visas or passports that would allow them to leave. I'm reading a report just now that Israel is even warning to strike any aid coming from the Egyptian side into Gaza. So with no food, no electricity, and no water, we can only expect what Israel has been working to achieve, what Israel and Israeli officials and politicians are promising now. Some are calling for striking Gaza with a nuclear bomb. Can you imagine that? And many other Israeli officials are using Nazi discourse and Nazi language, talking about Palestinians as savages and animals that need to be exterminated, and that Gaza needs to be turned into a parking lot. This is what we are dealing with. We're dealing with a systematic, structural, colonial attempts to annihilate and exterminate the Palestinians with the aid and support of the West and American tax money. America is sending $8 billion. This is really insane. America is also sending warships and bombs and bullets for Israel to kill more and more Palestinians. Governments are not only complicit or giving the green light, they are participating actively. The shameful statement from France, Italy, UK, and Germany and America the other night was a hideous attempt to justify Israeli massacres and genocide taking place in Gaza. We have no hope in these countries. We have no hope in these governments. At least now, the only hope we have is in the growing popular support in America, in the movements the movements, the human rights and the rights movements in America and across Europe, to take to the streets, to pressure their politicians into putting an end to this dark episode of not only the history of the Middle East, but also the history of humanity. If people are asking how was the Holocaust allowed and other genocides in Africa and across the world. Now you can see this live on TV, live on social media. Palestinians' whole blocks destroyed,